Hmm. Today's guest is Derek Tyler. He has several books out. Two, the last time I checked Amazon, and I think there's a third one. He's a well known speaker at conferences, and he spoke at the last Contact in the Desert, which was in 2019, as this year's was canceled due to COVID. And he doesn't do interviews. So I am deeply, deeply honored that he agreed to come on my show. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be on your show. And I hope it does great. I know it's a fairly new show, and I hope it's gangbusters for you.
Thank you. I don't know what numbers mean because this is the first time I've been on a radio show. So I'm just like, okay, they tell me what the numbers are, and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
I think I've done every radio show in the country after my first book came out, and after my second book came out, I just stopped doing them. I did so many that I couldn't even keep them straight anymore, you know, and I got asked to do so many shows that I ended up having no time left to myself. It seems like. So this is the first show I've done in about 2 years.
That can happen. Mine go through spurts where I normally have like 2 a week, and then I'll have a dry spell. And then when I first had this show, I had 10 interviews on top of the shows in a 2-week period. And I by the end, I was like, nope, can't do that. Nope, not going to happen anymore. I'm too tired.
Yeah.
I'm 64. I'll be 65 next month, and I'm just, I'm getting too old for this.
Well, it's most shows don't have a very big audience either, so you don't end up reaching as many people as you would like to reach most of the time. I will probably still do coast to coast when I publish a new book. I've got a kind of an open invitation from Connie Wills there, who's the weekend substitute host, and they have such a huge audience that you almost can't afford not to do that show if you have a chance to go on it.
Well,
because they get like 15 million people, so that's
I can't imagine having that many people watching me. I have had interviews that were put on YouTube. The one that has gotten the most was 75,000 views, and
well, that's good. That's a good amount.
So I am a known quantity for those folks who came from the prior show and don't know who I am. I am a known person in the SSP Secret Space Program and Super Soldier community, and there are folks in the UFO community who have heard of me as well.
Let me say, you've always been a good friend to me too, Penny, and very helpful to me. Anytime I've needed help, you've answered my questions as best as you can, taken the time to do it carefully and fully. And I'm hell on wheels when it comes to con artists and frauds, and it's hard to get a good recommendation out of me, but you get my full support.
Thank you. I've noticed, especially this last year, that people are starting to quote me in books, and when I read the quotes, it's almost exactly opposite of what I actually said. So it's a mixed blessing.
Well, I've gotten quite an increased understanding of the SSP in general and the conditions on the moon and Mars by listening to you and Tony Rodriguez and
Tony and
Randy Kramer also.
Tony and I kind of overlapped. He was on Mars probably about the time I was leaving, and Randy also got there about the time I was leaving. But I know his Battle of the Blender, my commander ordered it, and he and I have discussed what happened to my commander because
a hypnotically controlled army.
Well, I live in a apartment complex, and you remember last year when they were going to have that invasion of Area 51?
Right. Yep.
That was on our news out of Sacramento. And two of the neighbors came to the door. They showed the the Tic Tac video on the news, and then they talked about the invasion of Area 51. And two of my women neighbors came and grabbed me, dragged me out of my apartment over to one of theirs. They had all the women in the complex in that living room. And it was, Penny, we know you know what this is about. Spill.
Isn't that something? That was
Yeah.
that invasion of Area 51. That was the dumbest idea. I mean, well, I can't say the dumbest idea because Nancy Pelosi's talking these days, but it was a very dumb idea. You know, I mean, she almost has a copyright on dumb ideas by now, but
Well,
I don't know what they thought
that
they were going to
was,
find. If they're going to tell them 2 months in advance that we're going to be invading, what do they think is going to be left there when they show up? You know, nothing
well,
but armed
they,
guards in trouble.
and they were going to do that weird run where their arms were behind them, and
Like the
you
army
know
doesn't know how to deal with that. I think their tanks can handle that.
they didn't even need tanks. All they
No,
needed were the sound guns.
right,
The
right, because they're using
LRADs.
weapons that we don't even know, the public doesn't even know exist. They're
Yeah,
using microwave weapons and scalar technologies. The public doesn't even know these things are possible, much less being done. They can read your mind from a distance. They can insert their thoughts into your mind from a distance, and you'll think they're your own thoughts. Those things are not
exactly.
science fiction. They are practical achievements. They are being used every day, and
Voice
people
to
don't realize it.
voice to skull technology. They can put their thoughts in your mind, and you won't even know the difference. And they've been doing this to people since 1981.
Wow.
When do you remember the Kuwaiti War in 1989?
Yep. Sure.
You remember all of the Iraqi soldiers that just laid down their guns and surrendered?
Right.
That
Absolutely.
was because they were using voice to skull technology, and these people thought they heard Allah tell them to surrender,
Right.
and they were obeying their God.
I talked to someone once. He was a physical therapist in a hospital, but he'd have been a medic in the army back in the Desert Storm, and he said they were using voice to skull combined with um, hyper advanced holographic technology. They were making Allah appear above the U.S. troops
Mm,
like he was on their side, and then they were injecting his voice into their minds. He said they just laid down their weapons and went face down in the sand and surrendered.
yeah, well, if you're a true believer and you're seeing your God, it would be basically like Christians seeing Jesus hovering over the enemy camp. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
This is
you can't believe anything now, can you?
no
You can't believe anything.
between the Project Bluebeam um, holograms and voice to skull technology that is synthetic telepathy. There's nothing you can believe. And then I get these people that they want to talk about such and such ET was channeled and gave them all this information. And I'm going, if you are not wearing if you are not wearing an EMF blocker that blocks Wi-Fi, I'm not going to listen to what you're saying.
Oh, I trash those people in front of as big an audience as I can find, because to me this is all critically important stuff. That when we're dealing with ETs, we're dealing with critically important, uh,
Mm-hmm.
existentially important things for the human race, as far as I'm concerned. And I like to have fun as much as the next guy, but I don't have any time for jokes or games when it comes to ET and alien contact, because it's too
Yeah.
serious, it's too important, and in my opinion, we have to get this right the first time. We might not have a second chance. We have to get it right the first time, and I'm not going to listen to somebody saying they're channeling messages of peace and love from gray aliens from their home world. I'm going, no, you're channeling lessons of BS from your own fevered tiny brain.
Uh, Actually, my experience dealing with these people is that most of them are hearing synthetic telepathy, and the message is being fed from the CIA.
Well, it makes sense. It makes sense that it would be. I've
So
heard, and I don't know if this is true. Maybe but I've heard that the Draco monopolize all the communication within Earth's atmosphere, and that they prohibit other ET races from communicating with us, and a lot of times because they have, I don't know if satellite technology or what they have that's blocking their communications out. Is that true?
that's not true from my experience. My experience is that Earth, well, I have interaction with the Guardians, the military police of the galactic government, and they have stepped in and have made it. They have made it where the no one can invade us.
Well, they've already invaded us, so they're kind of late.
They are kind of late, but they are saying that the Anunnaki are who is in charge here, not the Draco. And they have the Draco are gone as far as they're concerned. They may have one or two left to collect taxes, but that's it.
Do you think that's true?
Um,
We still have the Federal Reserve Bank. I figure when the Draco leave, the abductions are going to stop and the Fed's going to be dismantled. But none of that's happened.
that's because the elites are not Draco. The elites are Anunnaki.
Uh, huh.
And I know this because I am from that bloodline and I'm Anunnaki.
I've heard that the Anunnaki of legend still survive after all these thousands of years. Is
Yes,
that a fact?
that's a
There's, I
fact.
mean, like Enki and Enlil, the and
Well,
Al.
the Guardians have been arresting folks, and there have been 11, 11 Anunnaki were killed for trying to kill a Guardian. Uh, Baphomet was killed for violating the Prime. The Prime is
What keeps them from regenerating him?
the Guardians kept his body.
Oh, let's see.
Um, his head was exploded, and they kept his body, and his soul was turned over to the Lords of Karma, which are very real,
And
and
he was an Alpha Drake.
he was an Alpha Drake. He was not from the ruling families. He was an entrepreneur
Let's
who
see.
thought he had figured out a way around the Prime. The Prime is a body of law that affects how advanced races deal with primitive races. And I know everybody thinks we're so advanced we're going to be ascending, but the truth of the matter is we're a pretty primitive race.
Oh, we're monkeys that drive cars, basically.
Pretty much. I mean, I'm glad you understand that because a lot of the audience won't. It's
Well,
like,
it's a
what
natural
do you
tendency that people have to give humans a lot more credit than they're due, and to drastically overinflate our importance and
mm-hmm,
our value in the greater scheme of things. Because, of course, to us, we're important. To us,
mm-hmm.
we matter. But to many of the citizens of the cosmos, we are nothing or less than nothing to many of them. We don't matter to them. They've had space travel for 100 million years. They don't care about monkeys that drive cars too much.
Um, Actually, they're pretty worried about the monkeys who drive spaceships.
Well,
And
but those monkeys that drive spaceships are they've trapped us here on Earth, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we don't get any benefit from that at all, do we? They're leaving us here to suffer whatever fate we suffer. We're not going to get out
The,
there.
the impression that I had gotten was that the folks in charge thought they were going to be able to trash Earth and then escape, and that was a rude awakening for them when the Guardians showed up, because they're not being allowed to leave. And the monkeys in spaceships are all being brought back to the solar system. That when you see the pictures of all these spaceships coming out of the sun,
Yeah.
those are from all the colonies that are out in space.
Oh, really?
Those are humans being sent back to the solar system, and they're not coming back to Earth. They're coming back to other planets where they're being settled. So,
I wondered what was up with that sun because, as you know, they closed most of the solar observatories last year all of a sudden at the
uh-huh,
same time, and
that's
it
because
had to
of the
be because there was
ships.
something happening with the sun that they didn't want us to see.
It's all the ships coming back. Um, there and it's wave after wave after wave after wave. I served with the Germans, and they had at least 1,000 colonies with 1 billion people on each of them, and
Wow.
all of those are coming back to the solar system. And
Why?
because all of the humans out there, it's not just the Germans, it's the Germans, it's what they call bankers in space, which is the same as the military industrial complex.
Hmm.
They have a faction of their own, and there are two mercenary companies out there, and the DoD has a presence out there. That's the Department of Defense for listeners. They have a presence out there, and the Russians and the Chinese and every country that has nuclear weapons is part of a group that's out there. And all of these factions have their own bases and colonies. Oh, and Solar Warden, which is strictly American and run by the US Navy. So you have all of these guys out there, and all of them are doing the same shit. They are going into a world and capturing civilians and turning them into cyborgs and selling them to other ETs in exchange for advanced tech. Well, under the Prime, they can't give us real tech, so they're giving us the equivalent of toys.
I see.
And we go through and we trash the planet, take all the resources that we can figure out how to use, and just leave the mess, exactly like the American corporations have done to the third world. We're doing that all through the Sagittarius arm of the galaxy. And we have reached the point, because the Germans went back 400 years in time to found these colonies. That's why they're so big now. And so the the galactic government has been watching this for 400 years, and they finally reached the point that they're saying enough. So they're sending us all back to the solar system. And you've heard about the soul trap for Earth.
Yes, I have.
It's going to be extended to the entire solar system.
Really?
So,
That's a big deal, boy. That's it's something that you can't prove, but it's very profound.
and the Guardians have told me that once we are all back in the solar system, we will be offered the opportunity to be taught how to be a galactic citizen as a race. We will be taught the rules. We will be taught how to interact with other races, and we will be expected to take care of every single sentient individual on our planet. And not all of those individuals are human. There are other sentient races here too.
Hmm.
So this is basic number one. Every sentient individual is to be given food, shelter, water, clothing if applicable, education, medical care.
That seems
Re-
reasonable. I mean, we
regard
can afford to do that.
regardless of our estimate of their personal value.
Right.
And that's the core underlying thing. We have to agree to that. And then the guardians will teach us how to be decent galactic citizens. And they told me this has happened 4 times before, and humanity has always told them no.
And that's why we were wiped out before.
That's why we were wiped out before. There is a cyclic disaster coming that can be stopped if we say yes. If we say no, it will be allowed to go forward and will be kicked back to the Stone Age.
Oh boy, is that having to do with the pole shift?
The pole shift is part of it, and it has to do with the iridium
Yeah.
layers. Every so many thousand years, there's a layer of iridium somewhere on the planet. That goes with this disaster.
Ah. So we will be basically eliminated.
Any anything, it's usually half the planet is destroyed, and there's a pole flip that destroys the other half.
Wow.
So it
Because there's evidence of so many ancient civilizations far older than they tell us we
mhm,
are. Far, I mean,
far
far
older.
older. They
Yeah,
find stuff in they find like spark plugs in coal that's
yeah,
millions of years old. It's not an
exactly.
accident, and it's not a fraud, and it's not an accident. They find it and then they cover it up.
Uh-huh.
And we've obviously been we've obviously been wiped out. I mean, for instance, the Mayan civilization. How do you forget the Mayans ever existed if you live in that jungle? That's like us forgetting that New York City was ever there. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen. You don't they don't just vanish and everybody forgets that the Maya civilization, Mayans temples are there and the jungle grows over them and nobody knows they're there. That's not realistic. The only way that can happen is if all those people are wiped out and somebody else is brought in and just planted there.
And then you have the situation of Gobekli Tepe.
Right. It's impossible that we could have built that according to the story that they tell us about ourselves.
Uh-huh.
And human evolution, according to the tenets of evolution itself, is not only untrue, it is impossible.
Oh
It
yeah.
simply cannot happen in the time frame that they give us. And they're trying to make me believe that people are going to leave a life of luxury and head up to Alaska and just stay there in Eskimos eating seal blubber. And they didn't think to head south toward Malibu. I mean, come on. I'm not buying this. You know.
If you look at the genetic studies and you compare humans to all of the other hominids, the other near human apes, you'll see that chromosome 2 is actually two other chromosomes that have been combined into one.
Ah, very interesting.
So that is proof we are an engineered race.
We have to
Ju-
be.
Just exactly like the ancients have told us we are. The Egyptians told us this, the Sumerians told us this. It's even in the Bible that the gods, the Elohim,
Yes.
plural, created Adamu in their image.
Interesting that the creationists end up being closer to the truth than the evolutionists, isn't
Yeah,
it?
well,
I mean, if we evolved naturally, there wouldn't be so many other galactic races that look just like us. They don't look like us. We look like them
exactly.
because their DNA was used in creating us.
And
I have a
gee,
friend named Jerry
gee,
Wells.
I've heard the name.
He was born on Tau Ceti in the Tau Ceti system. and he was brought here as a baby. He was spent his life in this world. He's given to the military, and they said, find him adoptive parents and don't mess with him. And he's a psychic healer. So quite incredible what he can do. But he looks just like we do, except he's got an IQ about 180 and he's 6'10". But
I know, I
but he
know a
looks
couple
just
of
like us
folks.
otherwise.
I know a couple of folks that are over 7 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But he looks just like we look. He's as human as we
yeah.
are, you simply can't evolve like that. Naturally identical things on different worlds like that. It's ridiculous.
The well, even the Bible says that we were made in the image of God. I mean, the
Yeah.
Elohim.
Right.
So
Very
the
interesting
the
stuff.
original language speaks the truth. Says it's a plural set of, more than one in.
Right.
So
Yeah, and it says in the Bible he has become like us.
yes,
He's become like us. But people, I mean, it's religion distorts everything eventually. Once it gets into the hands of men, it's distorted. It seems to me.
always it's distorted for control, just like television was distorted for control.
Yep. The best thing anyone can do, if you're listening out there, shut your TV off and leave it off forever. You'll gain back at least 10 points of IQ that it's sucked out of your brain without you realizing it. I guarantee it.
Well, first you'll go through withdrawal.
I thought I'd missed TV. I didn't. Haven't missed it for a second. I have not missed
But
it for a second. It's. I didn't even watch when the Seahawks made the Super Bowl, which
well,
I've been waiting for 30 years. But it's not worth it to me because the mind control is so pervasive and uh, it's so nonstop. You're hammered with it
mhm,
from all directions. Every time you turn the TV on, that's really all you're seeing is mind control in various forms switching off with each other.
yeah,
And if you watch it long enough, you are going to become just what they want you to become because these are very effective techniques. They're time proven, and they've been doing it now for what 60, 80 years on TV. They're proven to work, and they work over and over. You think you're too smart for it. You think they might be hypnotizing other people, but I'm too smart for that. No, you're not. You're exactly who
yeah.
they're targeting, and they're counting on you thinking that. And every time you think that, they get you a little bit deeper, and you don't even know it. That's why people are. That's why people are. That's why people are trashing President Trump with nothing but slander and libel because the media's told them this stuff and they believe it. They parrot it back, and it's not even true. They don't even know that they're being manipulated like that, and they get mad at you if you tell them.
I think there's a lot of stuff out there that we all think is true that isn't, and it's from all directions. I personally think that both parties are controlled by the Council for Foreign Relations
I do too. I'm sure of it. If Trump
because
was a Democrat, the Republicans would be doing right now what the Democrats are doing because the same people
exactly,
control both parties.
exactly. So I think that it's all controlled from higher up, that if we know the name of the people involved, that they're just puppets. And 90% of what's said about any of them is bullshit.
Yep. I don't believe anything the government says. I don't believe anything the TV says because
Well,
they're not there for my education. They're not there
well,
to inform me of the news. They're there to inform me of the propaganda message of the day.
that's sort of in keeping with what George Carlin says.
Right.
I
It's a great big club and you're not in it.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. George Carlin's one of my heroes.
So yeah, I have inherited a Facebook page from a very wise friend of mine, and he told me, he says, I only want to see the word God if it's in a George Carlin quote.
No, George Carlin, he was a true genius. He was really a brilliant man, and he chose comedy for his form of expression, and he did it so well.
Well, if you're going to tell people the truth, you have to make them laugh or they'll kill you.
I think that's right. Yeah, yeah, because we don't want to believe that we've spent our lives working for the wrong things and believing things that aren't true. There's a lot of people who invested their whole lives in science that's nothing but bullshit. You know, that
Hmm.
it's science that it's not only untrue, it's impossible, and they've invested their whole lives in supporting it, and
Well,
they don't want to hear that it's not true.
I have a friend who recently got his degree in physics, and I was taking part in a discussion on his wall and never mentioned that I was SSP or any of this stuff. And we were just talking, and I just said, relativity has mistakes in it. And physics isn't going to make forward progress until they go back before relativity and readjust. They need to go back to Faraday and electronics, or they're not going to make forward progress. And this one guy did a Google search on me
Ha 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 ha.
and came back and said, "Well, you're just an MK Ultra. I don't need to listen to you."
Ha 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 ha.
So,
You know who Boyd Bushman was?
no.
He was the head of well, one of the things he did was he was head of research for Lockheed. He was the
Okay.
father of the guidance system for the Trident missiles, one of his patents. But he
Cool.
also worked at Area 51, and he worked for he had he was a brilliant physicist, and he said there are mistakes in Einstein's equations. We've found them and solved them. He said in Area 51 we work with a completely different set of physics than you've ever heard of before.
Yeah. Well, in Shula on Mars, we were taught that the speed of light is not a constant, that it looks like one until you get near the speed of light, and then it becomes really obvious it's not.
Huh.
That Einstein should have kept his aether constant that he decided at the last minute to kick out. And there was something else that he had that was just really wrong. And so the Germans in space don't use relativity at all. They define gravity as a function of magnetism, not mass. And
Oh, that's interesting.
they combine quantum mechanics with electric universe, and that's what they're using.
And so they a lot of these spacecraft are using magnetic propulsion. Is that right?
Yes.
And also anti gravity.
Anti magnetic propulsion produces antigrav.
I see. Because I remember reading in James Defense online in 1998 that Boeing was already working with anti gravity. And
Well,
James Defense is the most legitimate publication probably in the world when it comes to things like that.
the repulsine by Schauberger, that was an antigrav device.
Huh.
And the engine that was used by the Sonora Aero Club was an antigrav device.
Oh, really?
That was in the 1800s.
Wow.
We've had it that long.
Wow. That's amazing.
So,
Well, people are so they're so disinformed and misinformed that they never they never even take the time to consider the possibilities that these things could be real, much less that they could be already in use.
yeah,
They don't even think that they're possible, and that's a great way to keep a secret. Is if you make people think that it's impossible, nobody will look for it.
exactly. As long as people don't think it's possible, they're not going to even acknowledge that this is going on. Um, I have been personally shot with DEW weapons, directed energy
Oh
weapons,
man.
and I talked about it in 2016. Well, gee, it was what, 2, 3 days ago that the US military admitted that the Russians and Chinese had directed energy weapons. They forgot to mention that they've had them too.
Right. Yeah. Have you seen the supposed pictures of the DEWs hitting the wildfires in California?
Yes,
What do you think of that?
I think that what's going on is to comply with Agenda 21 slash 2030 and the New Green Deal, both of which have large swatches of the country that humans will not be allowed in. And they are starting with the West Coast. And if we don't fight it, then it will spread east and eventually get everybody.
Wow. Because the I've seen aerial shots of the areas that have burned, the
Mm-hmm,
houses, and
mm-hmm,
and that the houses are burned to the ground. The ceramic bathtubs, the metal appliances, they're vaporized. But all
mm-hmm.
around those houses are green trees, perfectly healthy, that weren't burned at all, and there's no ashes on the roads. It's just like the road was just freshly built and swept.
And any plastic toys for children are untouched.
It's,
um,
it's just like the houses were targeted, but they're surrounded by green trees that, if you wanted to be safe from the fire, you could have just climbed a tree and you'd have been fine.
um, that's because the smart meters are starting those fires.
The smart meters, really?
And if you look at which communities were originally targeted, they were all communities that protested the installation of the smart meters.
Oh, is that right?
Hmm.
Oh boy, isn't that something?
And those people were all forbidden to rebuild, were forced to sell their properties at a loss to the local government.
Really?
Hmm.
Boy, and there's no getting away from smart meters now. There's no
Nope,
getting away from 5G. They're gonna force it on us whether we want it or not. I mean, it's already being done.
it's already being done. And 5G, I've heard a lot of stuff about it, but my research is that 5G is to force that synthetic telepathy onto the total population.
And why do they want to do that?
Mind control.
Mind control. Well, apparently it can do it. There's this guy named Dr. Barry Trower from England who
Yeah,
is
I know of him.
oh he's amazing, isn't he? I think he's probably one of the smartest people in the world. He's a professor of physics, advanced physics, chemistry, and mathematics, and he's a spy master to boot. He's the one who
Oh,
interviews the spies that Britain captures and debriefs them, and
mm-hmm,
he knows from the ground up. He knows all about electromagnetic warfare, the weaponry they use, and 5G, and what it does and what it doesn't do, and how they used it. And he's got several pretty extensive interviews on YouTube that's just fascinating to listen to. I think.
he did the basic research because the Soviets back in the 1960s were irradiating the American and British embassies there with microwaves,
Ah,
and the ambassadors and spies that were working out of there were all ending up sick. So there was an American team and there was a British team, and they were working together on this. And he was on the British team trying to figure out what the problem was, what was causing it, and how to block it.
yeah.
So,
And he says that they're doing it now with these fake microwave towers that they're building.
oh yeah,
They're not really microwave towers. They just appear like that from the outside, but uh, they're really microwave weapons and
mm-hmm.
and DEW towers and synthetic telepathy outposts too that they can
um,
use to tune into your thoughts and read your mind from a distance.
there was a movie about it in just after 2000. It was either 2004 or 2005, somewhere around then, called Control Factor,
Oh, really?
that was talking about what these towers are used for. And
I'll have to watch that. I didn't know about that.
it's particularly referencing something known as Project Satan, which was created by Dr. Robert Duncan, who was a Harvard professor at the time. And someone convinced Dr. Duncan that he was going to go to hell for this. And so he became a whistleblower, and now he's targeted by the same stuff that he designed.
Oh man. As Sam
So,
Kinison once said, "Go to hell? Are you kidding? I've been married 3 times. I'm gonna be a tour guide in hell."
I keep hearing a lot of that. I've been married twice, and yeah, both of them were hell. But I've been with Lou for 20 years, and
Oh, that's great.
we haven't killed each other yet.
Well, I can't help but feel that the people of the United States and probably of the world, but specifically the United States, the people of this country are good-hearted people. Most of us are. We mean well to our neighbors. We're generous and kind. We've donated money that we didn't have to donate to help people we don't know and never will know for years and decades. And we deserve better than we're getting. We deserve a better fate than is being prepared for us.
I agree. I did a cross country trip by myself in a Chevy Blazer in 2016. And I'm not a wealthy person. I had enough money for the gas and for food, but not for hotel rooms all the time. So I would park in Walmart parking lots going across
Right.
country. And I was never hassled. Well, Grimes, Iowa, the police had to run my plates twice in one night, running the lights and the sirens.
Oh boy. Well, Walmart usually won't complain if you park there. I don't think.
I would go in and ask the manager, and or the assistant manager that was on duty, and they always said, "Yeah, sure, just park out there by the trucks." So I did. I never had a trucker hit on me. I never had anybody do me any harm. And I drove I live in the Mother Lode, north of Yosemite.
Uh,
So I drove up to Reno, up 49, up to Reno. And then I took I-80 most of the way. I took a side trip to Kankakee, Illinois, where part of my family is from. I took pictures. I spent a day taking pictures in the cemetery.
ah, ah,
I do genealogy as a hobby.
I see.
And so I was taking pictures of the gravestones for the family tree. And I spent a day doing that, got sunburned. Then went US 30, the old Lincoln Highway, across Ohio and all that. And I ended up in DC. And the person I was going to see, I had the wrong address.
Oh no. Oh,
And
boy.
I ended up, Lou got a hold of him on Facebook, and he gave me the correct address, and I ended up spending a week there and then going down to another friend's place in Greenville, South Carolina. So I spent, well, because my car broke down in Colorado, I spent almost 3 months on this trip.
Wow.
And I have California plates, okay? So I'm going through this whole region, and everybody treated me well.
Yep. No, I think that the heart of America is good.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of good fortune by coming across an untouched continent, basically. That we could
Mm-hmm.
that we could take advantage of the natural resources and the open space here. But the people of this country have proven themselves time and again as being decent, generous, and hardworking people. Uh, whenever there's a disaster in the world, we're the first ones there to help. Always. You know, we're the first ones that we send a hospital ship. We'll send you food and clothing, whatever you need. We've always been the ones there, and nobody helps us at all. When 9/11
Well, I
happened,
don't know.
nobody sent us a damn blanket. They didn't even send us
Uh,
a damn blanket.
Excuse me. When 9/11 happened, the Russians sent us quite a bit of stuff and even built a monument across the bay from it.
They did.
They
Well,
did. It's got this beautiful teardrop in the middle of it. The
huh.
Russians built that. And the current fires that have been all up and down the West Coast, Mexico just sent a whole set of crews to fight those fires in Oregon.
Well, about time, I must say.
So,
I mean, it's about time. They waited. Would they wait till our forest was almost burned up before they started? I mean, it's not like we owe them any favors. I don't think. You
well,
know.
I wanted to make it clear this has this
I
is
remember a few years
no.
ago we had 50 communities flattened by tornadoes, and nobody helped. None of the countries that we've been giving assistance to, it's like they didn't care about us at all. You know, our we rebuilt rebuilt Europe twice. They
Yeah, we
didn't
did.
help rebuild us. They didn't help save our railroads. You know, I mean, it's frustrating because all these things collectively weaken us. They weaken the United States financially. You know, having an open border to the south weakens us tremendously over time. Every person that comes across illegally, they make the illegal aliens are causing us to be less secure. They're causing more violence, more crime, uh, drop in educational scores. I mean, a drop in the skill level of the average citizen. It's
Well,
all
I think the drop of the skill level and the education is due to our education.
right, but they're coming up uneducated and unskilled, and
The
it's
ones
all
I know have skills.
say again.
Uh, the illegals that I know all have skills.
Well,
They,
I come from a town where it's 2/3 illegal aliens, and that's not the case.
I grew up in Tulare County.
Well, they don't have they they the ones I grew up in Yakima, Washington, which is it was like a farming community, and it ended up becoming like a heroin hub.
Well, Tulare County is the breadbasket of California. They grow crops. They grow they have dairies, which is what I grew up on. They grow almonds, they grow walnuts, they grow grapes. Tulare, Madera, and Fresno County grow the grapes for the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And without the illegals who come and cut those grapes, there would be no harvest because Americans won't do it. It's
Uh,
too it's too hard a work.
they used to do it. I mean, they say that up here about the apples. Yakima is the apple capital of the world, but they used to harvest the apples no problem. And I'm not saying that every illegal who comes here is useless, but many of them have no intention of working, and we know that's true. I mean, many of them come up here and they do not try to become part of our culture at all. They install their own culture within ours, if you know what I'm saying. I mean,
Well,
Yakima
I
has a
grew
big
up
section of it, which is a barrio now. You can't even go
I,
safely into it.
I grew up with those people, and I can walk into any barrio in California. So I don't know. I have no way to relate to this. I
Well,
have never. I have even been dropped off in Compton and gotten out of there with no problems.
I went to Compton by accident once. The scariest place I've ever been. That's
I
the most
used to
scared I've ever been.
I used to live in Southeast San Diego.
Yeah.
So,
I took the wrong turn off the freeway once and ended up in Compton, and you could just feel the hate. I mean, I could see people looking at me. I was like, oh my God, I got to get out of here before someone kills me for just being here, you know? And that was really scary to me. I was
what
out of
year
my
was that?
81.
Well, I was in Southeast San Diego in 81, and I was walking down the street with my baby in a stroller, and nobody
Huh.
ever said a word.
I like San Diego. I miss it sometimes.
I went to San Diego State.
Oh, you did? I
Yeah,
lived
I
down there for
made
about 3 years, and I try to not miss Southern California, but sometimes I still do.
I majored in double major in microbiology and chemistry.
That's the prettiest city I've ever seen.
It was then. I haven't been there since 85, so I don't
Yeah, I
know what
haven't
it's like.
either. But it
I
was
under,
it was sure like a little piece of paradise then.
I understand that they closed down half the military bases and that it was like the economy died.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Huh?
That's all that's left there now are the colleges.
Really?
So,
It was certainly beautiful when I lived there. LA I didn't like too much because it was, I was coming from a small town, and going from a small town into LA, that's a world change that I wasn't ready for.
yeah, that would be. Um, I came from Farmville, basically, to Riverside and then to Orange County because my first husband was a minister
Ah,
and he was taking his training in Orange County. And then we moved back to the Valley, and he decided he was going to get his Master of Divinity so that he could be a prison chaplain. And he decided to go to San Diego State, so that's where we went. And then he went to Fresno Mennonite Brethren.
wow.
So yeah, I
And
was
you're
back
you're up
in the
by
Valley.
Yosemite now?
I'm by Yosemite now.
I've never been there. I hear that's just gorgeous.
Well, it would be if it would stop burning.
you know, I've I'm 60. I'm almost 61. In 3 weeks, I'll turn 61. I've never seen anything like these fires in all my life, but the last 3 summers, it's been like the whole world was burning down on the West Coast. I mean, the smoke has
Hmm.
been so thick that we couldn't go outside, we couldn't breathe. Uh, we were trapped inside, and it was just the forests were on fire everywhere. It seemed like
Hmm.
I've never seen it ever happen in my life like this, and now 3 years in a row, they're burning us into oblivion.
Well, living where I do, I've been seeing the fires started about 20 years ago when they stopped doing the control burns in the winter.
Oh, really?
And since then, well, that was about the same time that they did the chemtrails. Real name is stratospheric injection. If you want to
Oh,
find
really?
out what they really are, look that up.
I will. Thank
And
you for telling me that.
the ingredients that they found in them are aluminum, strontium, and barium that together make a fire accelerant.
Oh,
So they are also including glyphosate. So they're spraying this stuff on the forest. It's killing the trees. Over half the forest is already dead.
oh my.
You you go across any of the passes and you look out over the forest and it's brown.
Really?
So these forests are already dead. And all it takes is a spark. And they're coming through with these planes with nose mounted laser cannon.
Right.
And they're just, all it takes is to set one or two of those trees on fire and you've got the whole thing going because they're dead already. And instead of logging them, they're burning them.
Wow. And I've been seeing chemtrails since at least 1995
Hmm.
that I know of, for
That
sure.
that was about when I first started seeing them. I started photographing them here in about 2005. And at first it was just on Sundays. And now there's a checkerboard pattern in the sky that goes from Bakersfield all the way up to Reno, or
Wow.
that's as far as I've gone, so it may go farther. And
Wow.
it's the entire Sierras. So this checkerboard pattern is reapplied as it starts to dissipate. So it's an ongoing several times a day thing.
Wow. And I've heard that they also put a lot of aluminum in the chemtrails to make it causes. I think that they say it causes the sky to become like a screen that they can project holograms onto.
Well, it's part of their weather control system. There's a PDF out about the Air Force controlling the weather
Yes.
by, I believe it was 2025. And that's the underlying reason for the chemtrails, is it enables the weather control. And that was because rain interferes with military communications. So they were trying to limit the amount of rain in military areas.
Well, so that's a lot of trouble to go to and a lot of expense for that.
Well, they have managed to stop the Gulf Stream.
Oh boy.
So they've affected the entire planet because they've been messing with the weather. And the other things this can be used for is the holographic projections. It can be used for mind control. It can be used as a medium for scalar waves. And I'll tell you, there used to be a website that was monitoring the HARP frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
And when it had a ring over my part of the state, I had a headache so bad that
Really?
it felt like my head was going to crack in two.
Wow.
So that's I still get the headache, but I don't have any way to do the comparison because they took the website down.
They seem to be geoengineering us to alien specs almost in a way. You know,
They are.
we're getting hotter, we're getting darker, we're getting more radioactive. Methane, the methane leaks aren't even being stopped. I mean, it seems
Have,
like
have,
being prepared for.
okay, you need to look into the Jason's report that Eisenhower had done. The
Okay.
alternatives 1, 2, and 3. They were about that the planet was going to be terraformed for a race, and how was humanity supposed to respond to this?
Oh, really? Very interesting indeed.
And
No
all
wonder I like hanging out with you, Penny. You always teach me something new.
I have answers.
I love answers because I have questions. You know, I've been studying this all my life, and the more I learn, the less I know. I mean, I think that the more one learns about alien contact, the scarier this whole thing becomes overall, because we're outclassed and outpowered no matter which direction we look. You know?
Well, a lot of the problem is that the Guardians waited too late to stop the nonsense. They have stopped the Draco intervention.
They have.
They
That's
have.
true. Because I wasn't believing that. I've heard people say it, but I don't know. I didn't know
Well,
why they were thinking that. I guess.
okay. There are a lot of people out there that are blowing a lot of bullshit.
Yeah.
And they've got so much bullshit mixed in that it makes it where you don't believe the truth parts. And that's really hard for me to deal with because a lot of the people in the disclosure movement are listening to the bullshit and not believing the true parts. And I'm like, there is no rebel alliance. There is a group that is from the bankers in space, the military industrial complex, that's going out and capturing people from other factions, and they're putting them through new mind control processes and then using them against their own people. And that's real. And it's part of, well, Ileana calls it planetary corporations, and she served as part of it, so I'm going to take her word for it. So, but the Germans call them bankers in space. So these are the corporations that are out there doing this. And if it's the corporations, they're not the Rebel Alliance.
That makes sense.
So, but I've got people that are just absolutely convinced it's a Rebel Alliance, and that I'm giving out disinfo because I'm like, wait a minute, I had a chip in my brain that if I even thought about Earth, they were going to explode my head.
Oh, jeez.
How I was chipped into the ship's computer. They were monitoring everything, and they had a bomb in my head. So,
Oh, man.
how
And
the
there's so
how
much
the
white noise
hell?
always too. There's a constant background of white noise that's put there intentionally,
Yeah,
and it's hard to discern sometimes.
so if they were doing that to me in the Germans, and Ileana says that they were doing that to her in planetary corporations, and Tony talks about that he had the same chip in his head and he had a slave ring that they would
Right,
just drop him to his knees.
right.
How the hell are these people supposed to rebel?
I don't see any way. I don't see how they can. And I don't see. I personally, I don't really see how we can beat the SSP. And I think if we don't beat them, they're going to beat us. They're beating us now, aren't they? I mean, they're so
The SSP is made up of humans.
right, but we're not getting any advantages from it, are we?
The general public? No.
But
It's it,
they're taking our resources to finance part of the SSP, right?
oh, they're taking
Trillions.
trillions every year
Right.
to finance the black ops that the SSP is part of.
Right. Our whole national debt would be paid off tomorrow if we get the money back that went into the Black Ops programs.
Well, we've estimated somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 trillion have been spent on it since Eisenhower.
Wow. And they're saying that 15 trillion has been spent on the subglobal system, the underground network of bases and
Mm-hmm.
highways and cities. Somebody very powerful clearly thinks that the surface of this planet is going to become uninhabitable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, if you look at those three alternatives, the first one was to blow a hole in the ozone layer to let the heat escape.
I remember that.
That is why we have a hole in the ozone layer. It's nothing to do with hairspray.
Huh.
Okay. Number two was to go underground. When they got underground, they found there were already 7 other races there,
Wow.
and 3 of them didn't like us.
Huh. Huh.
So the Department of Defense is at war with those 3 as we speak. That's what a lot of the earthquakes really are. And alternative 3 was to go into space. And they have done all 3.
But space is not people commonly think of the solar system and space as they think of the solar system as just being a big empty place waiting for us to go colonize it. But that's not how it is.
No,
I
it's
think
not.
every place of value in the solar system has already been claimed and colonized by someone else. They're not waiting for us to get to the moon and Mars. Somebody already owns the moon and Mars, and it's not us.
Exactly. And that was a big shock when they got out there, and that was a big problem for the Germans when they got out there, was they had to make a deal with somebody to have somewhere to go, because they were no longer welcome on Earth.
Yeah.
They were being killed off. So the only beings out there willing to make a deal with them were the Draco, and they found out in a hurry that that was a big mistake. But the truth is, they had no other options.
Right, because the Draco can do what they want anyway. I mean, with the Germans or
Within
without
reason.
them. I mean,
Yeah.
we certainly don't have the power to stop them from doing anything they want to do.
Um,
They had space travel when we were still monkeys.
they had space travel before we even existed.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they're so much more advanced than we are that we have no chance to ever be a threat to them or to ever catch them technologically. It's impossible.
Yeah.
You don't catch a 300 million year advantage by putting on an extra shift at General Dynamics.
No, and we live in the middle of their empire, so they are a given.
Yeah,
And any plan that you have to factor them into it because they are a given.
and they consider this to be their property, right? This planet.
Yeah.
What about that? What about the raptors?
Which ones?
The ones, the ones. Well, the only ones I know of. They say they're descended from dinosaurs. They're native Terran raptors.
Okay, the native Terran raptors are actually the same species as the native Mars raptors. They were separated in a war.
Let's see.
They they were a spacefaring race that has been brought back down to Stone Age on both planets.
Oh, here too. They've been brought
Yeah,
back to the Stone Age here too. Oh
yes.
wow, I didn't realize that.
Now, there is another underground race that is reptilian, that is able to manipulate your thoughts so that you see them as human.
Really?
Yeah, there was an interview with Lacerta.
I remember
That
that. Oh, yeah, I've
she,
listened to that many
she
times.
she was one of them.
I've listened to that so many times, and I've thought, if this is a fake, it's the best damn fake I've ever seen in my life
Yeah.
because it was so detailed and so wide ranging. I thought, boy, if somebody faked this, they did it for no money, and they did a better fake than anybody else has ever been able to achieve.
What made me stand up and listen was when she talked about that you can go into the museums and see how our scientists have put together the dinosaur bones,
Right, and we did it wrong.
and that we did it wrong.
I
And
I I remember that part specifically too. That's very fascinating, isn't it?
it is.
And she was very forthcoming about a lot of things that surprised me. I don't know, I don't know how that guy rated that he got to have a talk with a raptor, but that's one of the most fascinating interviews I've ever heard.
Yeah, that one was it's one of the best I've heard, and it is from her point of view, and they are higher intelligence than we are, and they do have more abilities than we do, and they can make you see whatever they want you to see. They don't even have to use tech to do it.
Really, and the reptilians, the Draco reptilians, I don't believe I don't believe in shape shifting.
I don't either.
I don't believe you evolve the ability to shift into some creature from a planet across the galaxy from you. That's ridiculous, you know.
Exactly.
But and I think as far as I can tell from thermodynamics, if you're a gigantic Draco and you try to shapeshift into a human, you'll burst into flame from the
Well,
conservation of energy.
it would be painful.
Yeah,
You
I think it would be
you've got
impossible.
muscles and bones. How are you going to shapeshift? I mean,
So do they use technical means to do that, or do they use ESP or telepathy to do that?
they can use either telepathy or holographic technology,
I see. Very interesting.
depending on how suggestible the human is. And most humans see what they want to see. It's
Well, we don't think it's possible that there's reptilians masquerading as humans. Most people
co-
would never enter their minds.
cognitive dissonance is a very real thing. When
Exactly.
Cortez showed up on the Mexican coast, only the village witch could see the ships because it was so far out of their experience that their brain couldn't even register that there was something there.
Wow. Well, it makes sense. And it's still in place today just as strongly. I
It
mean,
is.
we look at things and we know they're impossible, but we believe them anyway. They
But
tell us
I,
that they tell us the moon used to be a chunk. It was a chunk of Earth that split off, but they're both perfectly round now. How's that work out? You
yeah,
know?
um, I think people need to think about something. Okay, the Egyptian records, the Sumerian records, all describe the elites as being descended from the gods.
Yes.
And all of the Earth's sky gods are ETs. Most of them are Anunnaki. Okay? Both Egyptian and Sumerian texts say that the only ET whose sperm worked with Earth humans was Enki,
Ah.
that particular individual. So
Ah.
all of the elites are descended from him.
I see.
And he was an Anunnaki royal. He was not a Draco.
And are they? And do they still live here? Some of them, don't they?
Yeah, Marduk does. Marduk had a whole crew that was here. And Marduk was recently convicted of violation of the prime and crimes against a sentient race and corruption as L, which is the head of the ET groups here.
They kind of waited a long time to do that, didn't they?
Yeah, there were they had a new legal theory that they are applying here, and because under galactic law you have mostly telepathic races,
Ah.
and you can say no with your thoughts, and if you don't say no, then you've said yes. So we're a verbal race instead of a telepathic race. And so we have to say no out loud.
But we don't know we have the choice.
That's because our religions and mind control have told us not to.
Right.
We religion actively tells us to submit to God's will. Relig- New Age religion tells us what you resist persists. We're told to accept. So the truth of the matter is, under the law, if you don't say no, you've said yes. And at that point, they are compelled under contract law to go through with it. So
Ah.
this is what we've been dealing with from their side, is that this is how their laws are set up. And as a verbal race, we're not saying no. So there was a new theory that pre-verbal children say no by kicking and screaming. So the convictions that we have gotten have been based on that.
The convictions that we've gotten have been based on that.
Yes. Babies kicking and screaming.
Oh boy. You know, we're a sad bunch of monkeys.
We are a sad
I
bunch of
I
monkeys.
used to
And
know this
people,
guy who was a colonel in the Air Force, and he was very nice to me, and he worked spent his whole career in Black Ops. He retired as a one-star general, and he told me that, and he worked directly with alien races sometimes,
mm-hmm,
and he had things that he wanted people to know about, but he couldn't tell them. So he trusted me to tell him some of those things because
good.
because he said I've gained in rank over the years, but it's cost me the ability to speak out.
Yeah.
He says if I speak out now, I not only put my whole family in jeopardy, but I throw away my career, my retirement, everything I've worked for. I can't do it.
Hmm.
And he says, but you can. And he watched me on IRC for a while. He said, I know that when you speak, people listen to you. They pay attention. You say it in a way that makes them believe that you know what you're talking about. And he said I went to a meeting once with two Syrians, the reptilians.
Okay.
He always called them Syrians. He said they're about 7 feet tall.
Well, that's because there are Syrians, there are beings from one of the planets around Sirius that one of this, there's like three stars in Sirius, and one of them has a planet that has reptilians.
I see.
They are not the same as Draco.
Hmm. These were the ones that he was familiar with, was the Syrians. And he
Okay.
said that he went to a meeting once with two or three Syrians were in the meeting. He said I felt like a chimpanzee surrounded by geniuses when I was in
Yeah,
the presence of those beings. He said it's not very flattering when you find out that your race is a bunch of crude, dishonest monkeys surrounded by brilliant scientists, but that's just what we are.
that is what we are. And that is exactly why that the German officers willingly drink black goo, because it will triple their IQ and put them in the same category intellectually as the ETs they work with.
I see. I see.
It does so at the expense of their humanity, though. They lose all of their compassion, they lose all of their empathy, they lose the ability to interact as normal human beings.
I've always thought that black goo was really one of the key things that I learned about too late, and I still don't know a lot I would like to about it, but it seems to me that it really has a huge effect on human alien relations
It
and
does.
interactions, and it's something that it, I mean, it hasn't even been mentioned until the last few years that I know of.
Well, it's something that a lot of the people who have interacted with it don't want to talk about, because so many people are so frightened of everything. Um, I've talked about it in conferences and had people ask me, are you still invested with it? No, they took it out of me when they sent me back.
They can do that,
Yeah, they can do that. They even have an antidote for it if you're given it accidentally.
really.
Yeah.
I've always listened to excuse me. I used to listen to Harold Katzvella talk about it a lot because he's given several presentations about it, and he's very interesting to listen to.
He's very interesting to listen to. He's very stuck on the religious side of it, and he has no personal experience interacting with it.
Right.
His experience is completely from the side of scientist, mystic, studying a phenomenon.
It's interesting that we at least have someone who's a combination of those things out in the public, because most
Yeah.
people are one or the other.
I'm kind of both, but I talk about the science and experience part because
You've lived it.
my goal is to stop the CIA from kidnapping children for black ops.
That would be a
There's
good place to start. All right. The CIA should stop kidnapping everyone.
there's nothing we do out there that cannot be done by consenting adults. So that is my goal. I don't get paid for stuff. I accept donations if people want to give them to me, but I'm doing this as a labor of love, that I want the kidnapping of children stopped.
I tell people
Period.
that if you want to know whether someone's for real or not, take a look at how much money they've made. Because the one thing the government is not going to allow is someone who's speaking the truth about aliens to become a multimillionaire with an international fan base hanging on their every word. They're going to put a bullet
Yeah.
through their head long before they can make $20 million talking about aliens. That's what they don't want to happen. If you're speaking the truth, you're not making that kind of money. And I also say, if you want to know the truth about aliens, just follow the trail of dead bodies, and it'll lead you there.
Well, I was being shot at was when I went public. They were shooting me and my partner with Jew. And when they shot us the third time, I looked him in the eyes and I said, you know, Bill Cooper says if you're going to get killed anyway, you might as well hide in the spotlight.
Right.
So we talked about it, and that's what I did.
No, that's he's in my opinion, he's the most valuable whistleblower that's ever walked the face of the planet.
Hmm.
And I think
I
probably
agree.
the second most valuable was probably William Tompkins. Who I think was very. I mean, he didn't even go public till he was 90 years old.
Uh,
The things
he
he said
he
were
gave,
amazing.
the things he said were amazing, and Michael Ralph.
I don't think I know who that is. Michael
Uh,
Ralph?
he Michael Ralph, Relfe. His wife has a website.
I don't think I'm familiar
Um,
with him. Surprise! That surprises me. I'll look
he
him up.
was he was the first whistleblower to talk about the Mars War,
Oh, okay.
and he did it completely by muscle testing base, and they used some technique that she knew from Scientology. So it was he had no one to read or talk to.
Oh, wow.
So he was completely on his own. And the two of them used muscle testing and this Scientology technique and came up with his entire service on Mars.
Wow. That's very interesting. I'll look him up. And
So,
if you don't mind me saying so, I think that you and Tony are going to be right up in that class too. I think that you and Tony are both. You should be classified as national resources. I mean, you're national treasures. The things that you've done and the courage that you've had in coming forward, and you've done it, as you say, you've done it for nothing. You didn't make a nickel from this stuff. Tony don't make a nickel from this stuff, and you're putting everything you know and love in jeopardy just by speaking out. And God bless you for it, because we we don't have many legitimate sources for this kind of information. We don't have many ways that we can become educated on it, and we don't have many people that we can listen to and trust. You know, I mean, I've been in this game a long time, and I know that the field of ufology is just full of bullshit artists, con artists, and morons. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it because I've gotten to where I can tell the difference pretty much now. But people that are just starting out, they can't. They don't have any
yeah.
basis to they don't know who's lying and who's not lying. They believe things that are not true from people that are just they're taking advantage of their innocence and their ignorance to make a buck off of them. But they're not helping anything, and they're holding us back, and they're getting in my way with the things that I and the things that they're getting in both of our ways, because we try to educate people, and they make it harder because they fill people's heads with dishonest information, and then you have to work against that all along the whole way.
Hmm.
It makes
You
it much
do.
harder. Makes it much harder for us to be heard fairly by people. It makes it harder for us to get our information out because we're competing against people with household name, fame,
Hmm.
and it's very difficult. When I went to the Contact in the Desert, probably well over half of the speakers on that podium or on the roster, I mean, were they were just con artists or they were liars. One or the other. They didn't know what they were talking about. They were they were misleading people. It's no wonder that the CIA is glad to have those conferences. It's no wonder
Hmm.
that they don't try to mess with them because they're they're filling people's heads full of bullshit. You
Well,
know, they
both of the
they leave there more confused than they ever were after they paid $400 a day to be there.
both of the conferences that I've spoken at, there have been CIA agents
Oh,
sitting
I'm
in the
sure.
audience,
Oh, I'm
sitting
sure.
sitting in the audience causing trouble. One got ejected from one of the presentations.
I had someone in both my presentations ask me where exactly I came up with those photographs, and were they NASA official NASA, what were the photo numbers of the NASA classification of these, you know, same guy in both lectures. He was clearly from the government. I was talking at 7 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, man. He wasn't there by accident. He was there because it was his job.
We're getting close to time to cut off. If you want to talk about your book and how books and how people can get a hold of them.
Okay, sure. Thanks. My first book is called Alien Contact: The Difficult Truth. It's a #1 bestseller. It knocked off Chariots of the Gods out of the #1 position. First time that's been done for 40 years, as far as I know.
Wow.
It didn't stay there long, but thanks to Coast, it was there for a little while. And the second book's the same thing happened. It's called Alien Contact: Paradigm Shift. It's a follow up to the first book. They contain lots of information that will be new to you, no matter who you are. I believe they contain probably the most descriptive uh, representations of alien abductions that I believe have ever been published, because I happen to have a lot of memories that I've retained from those experiences, and they contain interviews that I've done with insiders, including the gentleman I spoke to, that was Colonel. He wanted some
Mm-hmm.
information to be passed to the public. Well, it's in those books.
Good.
Another friend of mine was an engineer who was contracted by NASA and the Air Force to reverse engineer alien technology, and his interview is in those books too, plus many other things. I've covered a lot of ground. I've done it not for the sake of making money. I'm not interested in getting rich off this. I'm trying to teach people something because I can. I spent my whole lifetime learning this stuff. I didn't start publishing books till I was 55 because I wanted to make sure I had it right before I started talking in public. And if you want to, if you want something that doesn't see the world in rose-colored glasses and doesn't sugarcoat the truth, then you want to read these books. They're available on Amazon.com. My name is Derek Tyler, and you won't be sorry you read them. I don't sugarcoat anything, man. I tell you just how it is, and it's not always a pretty story, but it's better to know the truth than to go through your whole life being played along by people who don't have your best interests at heart. If we don't work
That's
together, we don't have a chance to succeed in the end. If we go down, we all go down together. You know, the
that.
ship sinks with everybody on it. So what I'm trying to do is to inform people the best of my ability, and to energize people into taking some action, and to stop putting up with this crap that they're foisting upon us. So that's it's Amazon.com. You can find them, and you won't be sorry. I can promise you that. I make sure that everybody gets a lot more than they pay for when they get one of my books.
Uh, if people want to get a hold of you, where's the best place?
Probably Facebook is the best place. I've got a YouTube channel that I haven't paid much attention to, but I'm starting to work on it now. But if you go to Facebook, Facebook.com/official Derek Tyler, you can go to my author page. I have a personal page there too, but my author page, you can get a hold of me, send me messages, whatever you want. And I reply to all messages. Sometimes it takes me a while because I sometimes get overwhelmed with volume, but nobody sends me a message that I don't take with the greatest importance and I don't pay attention to, and I respond to everybody.
Good to know. Well,
And thank you, Penny, again for having me on your show. God bless you.
well, thank you for coming. I still feel pretty honored to have you.
Well, I'm just like anyone else, but I've worked my whole life for this. You know, I didn't work my whole life to come up with the wrong answers. I'll tell you that much. I didn't work 50 years on this to get the answers wrong in the end. So that's good.
Well, thank you for coming. And for our audience, we have a show coming up. Uh, Let me see if I can get the name right.
Goddesses
It's
and Devils.
say
Goddesses
that
and
again, Katie.
Goddesses and Devils.
Goddesses and Devils with Katie Camara and her partner. And it's definitely worth listening to. So, with that, we'll say good evening, good afternoon, and we're out.